Thanks, Gray. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining. I was just talking to Gray how it's currently about 28 degrees centigrade where I'm sat in my office. Here on the south coast of the UK, we're getting a bit of a heat wave. So and of course I've turned off all my fans so I don't drown out myself presenting on this webinar. So uh, yeah, it's hot, but we're going to forge ahead. We've got some really exciting stuff to talk about today, and yeah, great to see so many people in the chat already. What I want to talk about really is how AI. What's the relevance of AI to Node-RED, and what are we doing here at FlowFuse to start bringing some of those capabilities to the Node-RED user experience? So if I get my focus in the right place. Who am I? For those who don't know me, I'm Nick O'Leary. I'm the co-creator of Node-RED, a CTO here at FlowFuse. So yeah, I've been working with Node-RED since before it existed, and working with the community to bring Node-RED to where it is today as one of the foremost low-code platforms in the industrial manufacturing IoT arena. And one of the things we often reflect on is why is Node-RED successful? What is about low code in general that is interesting and makes successful for users? So this is the agenda. I'm going to talk a bit about brief bit about why is AI relevant. I mean, there's I can't see the chat on here. There's many dozens of you joining to hear about AI in Node-RED. So why is it interesting to the low-code user experience and in Node-RED in particular? And then it's kind of some demos in two halves of looking at how can AI enhance the Node-RED developer experience. So that's how can AI help you create your applications, but then also how can you create applications that make use of AI? Because those are both super valid and interesting areas to explore with both Node-RED and AI. Just to reiterate, if you do have questions as we go, I'm more than happy to try and field them as we go. But to help us do that, please do stick them in the Q&A pod. Zoom likes to hide that window. You might have to find it in a drop-down Q&A, but if you stick any questions there, that we'll spot those much easier and makes it much easier for us to answer as we go. And please, I do encourage. I would like some of this to be interactive as we go. So again, for those of you familiar with Node-RED, I'm preaching to the converted. What are the benefits of low-code development that Node-RED provides? We talk a lot about democratizing software development, making it easier for traditionally trained software developers to build meaningful applications, helping them build things quickly, reducing the time to value of actually getting a solution working, as well as in the Node-RED instance, the fact it can integrate with so much, it just makes data so much more accessible wherever it may be hidden within your organization or talking to the device, wherever it may be. And yeah, there's many other benefits, but these are some of the ones I wanted to highlight when we start talking about the context of AI. And there's no, AI, machine learning, whatever you want to label it, it's been around a very long time. However, there's been a bit of a sea change over the last 2-3 years with some of the advances in technology and where we're starting to see these things get integrated in the software developer's day-to-day life. So again, split into thinking on two different halves, really. On the left here, we've got some of the various ways that AI help developers. We look at tools like Copilot from Microsoft, and many other solutions like that, helping the developer with code completion, code suggestions, using AI to generate test data, auto-generating documentation, linting, suggesting refactorings, whatever it might be, basically bringing AI to bear to help the developer achieve what they're trying to do. And then on the right, the sorts of solutions you can build with AI, doing image recognition, doing natural language interfaces, predictive analytics, report generation. Again, it's a huge long list. And we're not going to deep dive into all of these by any means, but it's yeah, definitely not a fad. It is here to stay. That the fact that our developer tools are just getting smarter and helping the user, and that's a key point. The AI that isn't there to do the work for you. It's there to help you do what you need to do. So that's where yeah, we've all heard the stories around while things are getting better, so the hallucination side effect of some of the LLM models of uh, these assistants will suggest something that might be 99% right, but maybe not quite get everything absolutely right, or it might start inventing things. So that's where it's quite important to treat these as assistants, not as replacements for what you want to do day to day. So uh, one thing, well, so what we're here to talk about is, well, what's this all mean in the Node-RED context? So when we talk about democratization of software development, clearly having an assistant that can help you go further with what you've got just helps. Even I've lost that sentence midway through. Having an assistant that can help you achieve what you're trying to do democratizes it even further, because one of the things with Node-RED is it's low code, and low code doesn't mean no code. So it is certainly true to say in the Node-RED context, there are still places where you need to dip in and write some code, or you might need to well format some JSON data or whatever it might be. So there are still plenty of opportunities there to have the tooling in the editor to help you do those things, because you know, even though the JavaScript in the function node, it is very accessible, as soon as you want to start doing slightly smarter things or more complicated things, then it does fall back on what is your knowledge of JavaScript, and how familiar are you with what's possible. So there's lots of opportunity there for AI to come to bear. If we look at some of the things that have happened over the last couple of years with enhancing Node-RED with AI, early last year, we published a ChatGPT function node for Node-RED. So this is a function node that it's a clone of the core function node, but with the ability to provide a prompt, ask ChatGPT, and we do some work in the background to help ensure that the response is well formatted for a function node in the Node-RED context. And that was a great sort of initial dip into the waters of what can AI do to help the Node-RED user experience. The downside of this approach is it is a custom node. So clearly, it's great for those users who have that node. It's also a challenge because it is a fork of the core function node. So as the core function node evolves, gains new features, then there is a overhead here of this node would need to try and keep up with updates to the core. So one of the things we want to do is think about, well, what can we do in the FlowFuse context of, we've got, we're running Node-RED in a managed environment, whether it's in the platform or in our, or on a device using our device agent. Where are there opportunities for us to enhance that developer experience with AI? So this is the FlowFuse Assistant that we launched last month that basically brings to bear some of these ideas, but in a way that is more closely integrated into the Node-RED user experience without having to use custom nodes. So right now, the FlowFuse Assistant provides two capabilities. So similar to the ChatGPT node I was just talking about, the FlowFuse Assistant enhances the core function node to let you do prompt-driven development of your function code without having to install custom nodes. And it can also do JSON generation. So wherever you need to set a JSON property or have a JSON object as part of your flow, you can now, using the FlowFuse Assistant, have the assistant generate that from the description you provide. So I'm going to give you work through some demos of this stuff. Let me just make sure. Yeah, next up is demos. So let me check I'm sharing the right stuff. So here we have FlowFuse instance running, Node-RED instance running in FlowFuse Cloud. Now, for this demo, I've got a few different scenarios I'm going to work through, show how the assistant can help me build the solution, and then, well, hopefully get the idea. As we go, please do ask questions. If you've got interest in other ideas for us to try out, we can see if we can try that out. So the first thing to notice, the FlowFuse Assistant, is we get this new button up in the top header. So what we can do with that is, for our first scenario, we want to combine two messages. So it's a super common question we get where a user has got streams of messages coming from different sources, and they want to combine two messages into one. Now, we have got the join node in the palette, which is one solution for that. But another way is to write a function node that can do some logic to combine messages. So for the FlowFuse Assistant, we open up the FlowFuse Assistant create a function node, and we want to combine two messages into a single message. Simple prompt. We ask the assistant, and that has now imported a function node, which if we open it up, so you can see with that basic prompt we've given it, combine two messages into a single message, it's taken a route of, okay, well, I know that message is the message being received, and I'm just going to combine it with message 2. Now, here's a good example of, well, that's not quite what we want to do. So we can notice here in the function node, we've got this ask the FlowFuse Assistant. We can come back in. In fact, what I'm going to do is clear that out. And we're going to ask the FlowFuse Assistant to try again. So we're going to say, combine, let's see, receive two separate messages and combine them into a single message before sending it on. So this time we've got quite a larger function. And this is one of the art with all of these prompt-driven things is working out, obviously, the more specific you can be in the prompt, the more detailed the response is going to be. So let's have a look at what it's decided to do. So in this instance, it has, using context to store messages. So whenever a message comes in, it's going to go and retrieve what we've currently got stored. It's decided each message is going to be separated by topic. So it's storing the message by topic, and combine messages. It's then checking, well, have I got both topic 1 and topic 2? If I have, it creates the new message, it clears out what's stored, and then it returns that new message. Otherwise, it just saves what's been stored and returns null. So again, it is a valid answer. And it, again, has chosen to use topic to combine the messages. That may or may not be what we want. But again, it's written all of this code. It's commented all the code. And that's a great starting point for us to be able to go through and fine-tune exactly this code. It's laid out the logic you would need. And yeah, that's a lot of code I haven't had to write.
Nick, it seems like you might have gone on mute.
Okay.
Oh, you're back now. Sorry.
Thanks for the nudge. I didn't knowingly do that. That might be my internet connections. So let's hope we're great. Thanks, guys. Sorry about that. So we're going to move on to the next example. I'm not sure where I dropped out. Here we've got an example flow, an HTTP endpoint listening for post requests on test data. Right now, I've got a function node that is just going to accept whatever comes in and reply. So then down here, I've got a simple flow that can inject what I'm going to call a valid request, which has a so let's pretend this is creating orders of some object with a color and a quantity. So I've got a valid request that had a color and quantity, an invalid request that just has a color. Now, if I run that, if I do the valid request, I get status okay. If I get invalid request, I get status okay, which isn't surprising because that's exactly what my function node is hard-coded to do. So what we want to do is add some validation. So let's get, right, I'm going to have to check my notes here because what we want to do is validate message.payload is an object that matches the JSON schema, an object with only the properties color, and please accept my British spelling of color, quant and quantity. Support I spell this correctly. The quantity property must be a positive integer. Color must be one of red, green, let's say blue. If the message is not valid, set message.status code to 400 and message.payload to valid request. Otherwise, set status code to 200 and set payload to an object with the property status set to okay. Oh, there we go. This one worked out. I'm gonna set okay, just do it this way. We do limit the prompt size. So let's see. Okay. Now what's interesting here is from that prompt, it's decided, well, I know that there's a good node module for doing JSON schema, AJV. So we've automatically added AJV as a module to import. It's created a schema. So you can see it's an object with the properties color and quantity. Color must be one of those. Quantity is an integer minimum of 1, and all the rest. It then does AJV compile, and then if it's not valid, so that is now doing exactly what we want it to do. One thing I'm just going to do, yeah. So now if we deploy, so if I send the valid request, I get okay, and let's just, this is the trouble, and I tweak the demo after the last run through without double checking. So valid request, we get okay. If I now send the invalid request, we now get invalid request. So the assistant has helped me build up a schema from a natural language description to exactly what I want. I see Eric's asked, why do you limit the prompt size in the assistant? Only early days, we obviously need to, we're gauging what the right sorts of limits we need to provide, just to, from a, running a service on the public internet, we're seeing what makes sense. So there is a limit on the prompt size at the moment, although, as you saw, it is pretty generous. Another quick example. Oh, yeah.
Add real quick. The limit to the prompt size. So the assistant ties into one of the first questions from Roberto, and it says, I assume each customer should provide its own API key when configuring FlowFuse, and I guess that ties into whether or not it's an external LLM or ChatGPT. Maybe you can touch on that real quick.
Sure. So at the moment, FlowFuse Assistant is only available on FlowFuse Cloud. It isn't something we're currently making available to self-hosted customers, although that is something we can work towards. And yes, in the back end, it is using OpenAI. We basically wrap the prompt with various directives that we need to do in order to get back, well, to ensure that it's responded to in the context of a Node-RED function, but also in that last example where it automatically updated the function node to import AJV. Again, part of the work we do in the back end as part of the prompting is we get OpenAI to also give us a list of additional modules that it's going to be using so that we can do that. Yeah, so that is something we have. If you are a self-hosted FlowFuse customer interested in this, come talk to us, and we're still looking at how we roll this out scalably. But if you're a FlowFuse Cloud customer, you just get this on any of your new instances you spin up today.
And last, we move on. We do have some attendees that are raising their hands. It looks like to speak. Do we want to save those till the end? I just want to acknowledge that we see those and make sure that we kind of keep on track. How would you like to handle that, Nick?
I would say if you've got your hand raised to ask something, just put a little nudge. If you can put a summary in the Q&A pod, just we're on topic, then we can.
Perfect. And then we can elaborate if there's need to. If we have any questions, we can elaborate with bring them and allow them to speak. Perfect.
Yes, and in usual style, with when you're doing live demos, you always think I've got about 5 minutes worth of content, and here we are almost 25 minutes in. So I'm also keen to make sure I get through all the bits I wanted to get through. So another quick example. Here I've got a UI webcam node, which is here, which hopefully it worked just now. There we go. Hello. So this node lets me take a photo from the dashboard of an image. And as you can see here, it then outputs that image in as a URI encoded base64, which if I wanted to capture that to a file, that's not very useful because what I need is a buffer to write to a file. So what we want to do here is we're going to convert a URI encoded image, URI to get the base 64. I've got to get all the details right. Convert a base 64 URI code image to a buffer. And then if I drop that in, let's just have a look what it does. So in this instance, it is, basically it knows it just needs to strip off the prefix and then it can use the buffer API to decode that. So let's just have a look what that results in. Turn on the camera again. Hello again. And this time we've got a buffer. So that is something I could then wire to a file node, and all's good. So again, it's these little tasks. That's not a lot of code, but again, it's if you don't know the specific APIs, if you don't know the logic of what you need to convert from and to, then the assistant just can take care of all that for you. So that's a lot about generating function nodes and the like. Something I wanted to have a quick look at is generating data. So we had some audio-visual issues during the webinar yesterday, so I thought I'd come back and re-record some of the stuff that you missed out on. So here we're looking at the FlowFuse Assistant and how it can help generate data. Because what's super useful when you're developing flows is to be able to develop against real data, but you don't always have that luxury. So for example, here I want to create a flow that can spot anomalies in a stream of sensor readings. Now, I don't have that sensor available to me whilst I'm developing this flow. So using the FlowFuse Assistant, I've plugged in this prompt to generate a message every second with a payload value in the range 0 to 100. The payload value should be fairly stable with small deviations and occasional large positive deviations, sort of spikes, in value that last between 2 and 5 messages. The message should have a topic property with the value data. So I fired that into the assistant and it's given me this function, which, sure enough, when it's triggered, sets up an interval. So every second it generates a message, and that message, it's got some logic in here to decide whether to send a small deviation or a large deviation based on what we've described. So with that running, let me see what we've got. So here we have, you can see the chart. We've got relatively stable data, but occasionally we do get these larger spikes along the way. So, okay, that's our stream of data. Let's start thinking, well, what do we want to do? Well, perhaps let's think about, can we generate the average of that? So let's see what we can do with that. We're going to calculate the average value of message.payload over the last 10 messages. Send a message containing the average value with a topic of average. So if we fire that in, average of last 10, so it's using context. Now, interestingly here, it has set up a context value which is already defined, so it shouldn't have done that. So what we can do is we can come in and we just need to get rid of that line. And this is a great example of how the assistant is still learning. It is there to assist you, and sometimes you do need to validate what it generates. So sure enough, it is using context to store an array. It's maintaining a list of 10, and then it's recalculating the average, and then it will send on a message with the average and that topic. So the reason I wanted that topic was so I should be able to just wire that straight to the chart node, hit deploy, and now on this chart, yes, we just have to trigger it again to start it sending data again. You can now see we've still got the blue, which is our raw generated data, and now we've got our line showing the average value as that progresses along. Now, I'm not a statistician. There are lots of ways of doing anomaly detection, but what we're going to do is we are going to look at for anomalies. So just like we did before calculating the average, we're going to ask it again to calculate the average value of message.payload over the last 10 messages and notify, let's be clear here, and send a message if the current value deviates by 10% for more than 2 values. Okay, let's see what that does. And again, as in all uses of AI assistants, there's a definite art to working out how best to prompt. So looking at what this one's doing, again, it's maintaining, you can see a lot of the similar code here about calculating the average of the last 10 messages, but it's added in this deviation count. So here it's looking for a deviation. If its deviation is above average, then it increases the deviation count. And then down here you can see the deviation count. It's sending a message, value deviated by more than 10% for how many messages, which is cool. But that it's doing what we asked it to do. So if we wire that up and stick it, say, onto a debug node and hit deploy, now when we fire this off, admittedly now we're kind of just having to wait for, well, here you go, we're getting some spikes here. This is the challenge with working with randomized data, is we need to wait long enough for it to actually trigger the condition we're looking for. Oh, and there we are. So value deviated by more than 10% for 3 consecutive values. So again, my goal here wasn't to get the perfect solution, but very quickly with the FlowFuse Assistant, it's generated the code to do the maths on that stream of data to start doing what I've asked for. And as I said in the introduction to the assistant, the goal isn't here for it to produce every line of code we want. It's very much the starting point. So from here the way it's structured the code, we can fine tune. In fact, look, here you can see we're getting a lot of deviations going on. sure enough, lots of large spikes above 10% and getting a run of them. Yeah, the code that the assistant generates is always just the starting point to help you get started, figure out the basic structure, and then you can fine tune it for what you need it to do. So that was the last part about generating data. We'd already gone through a bunch of these other examples during the webinar, and hopefully you've already seen those in the video. The next part I wanted to switch over to was then moving away from the assistant in Node-RED, looking at how flows you can create can be enhanced by AI. And the first example I brought up was around creating a very simple chatbot. Now, this is one of the super interesting use cases for LLMs and ChatGPT and the like. And Node-RED being Node-RED, there are community nodes for interfacing with ChatGPT. This one in particular, I've got an API key there that just lets me send prompts to ChatGPT and get the response. So I've just wrapped that up in a fairly straightforward dashboard flow with a text input and a template to render responses. I'm not doing anything special. With save message, I'm literally just storing what I type and storing the responses. I'm not doing any other manipulation. So it's very quick and simple demo of the chatbot. So here's the demo I had started last night. Tell me a haiku about Node-RED. But I could also ask, what is the best thing about low-code programming? And it's having a little think, and then it will come back with the ChatGPT's response about the advantages of low-code programming. Now, the point being here, this simple little chat UI, chat interface, it's like 3 nodes of Node of the FlowFuse dashboard. Make it super quick and easy to create that UI. And to plumb in ChatGPT, it's just a node. Now, there's far more that could be done, wrapping up and providing more context and more specialization. But this is the starting point. And one of the powers of Node-RED, with all of its nodes to interact with these different services, is it's super simple to interact with these APIs. And hopefully I'll now hand back to me yesterday, where I talk more about the image recognition stuff. Let me see.
No worries, and I can answer some of these questions while you come back real quick. What LLM core does this button use? Can we choose which one we utilize? So right now, the core LLM behind the scenes is we're leveraging ChatGPT to do that, and that's why we're talking about the tokens. That's a great question. If that's something you're interested in, making your own custom LLM to do things, that's one of the things that Nick was mentioning before, was potentially tying into an additional if you're gonna go on-prem or kind of like host your own, let's say FlowFuse, that is a capability to do that. Right now, at the beginning of the presentation, Nick brought up that we have a function node that ties into, which is a clone of the function node built into the core nodes, that you're able to put your own, let's say, ChatGPT API in that system. If you're interested in other, let's say, custom LLMs, there's maybe potential ways that can be done. That code is essentially available. I believe it should be on a GitHub open source. And if the licensing is what I would expect, it's something that you could potentially fork and maybe tie into one of your own custom LLMs if that's something you're interested in doing. And one said a question that says, how can one put the correct prompt? So I guess that's kind of like anything with any type of API or LLM model, is kind of playing with those particular prompts and making sure that as you get familiar with how it wants to take in the information. It's kind of like a calculator. As you use the calculator more, you know some of the features and functionalities of like storing messages or storing information in the calculator so that you can grab it and be used in later. It's kind of like the difference between, let's say, an accountant calculator versus, let's say, a scientific calculator. There are going to be different functionalities within those, and knowing how that prompt works is kind of understanding that kind of underpinning and just using it more. And can we expect for AI assistant to be able to look up for bugs in a flow as a whole? So that's really one of those like subjective things that AI struggles with, and I don't know if necessarily that's something that is never going to happen. I wouldn't say that's never going to happen, but I mean, I could see things right now. It doesn't have the features and functionality to say like, hey, can you add debug functions? Like, and maybe that's something we could potentially add in the future, is saying like, hey, I want to add a catch node that's kind of expanded beyond the function. But right now it's kind of limited to creating things with inside of a function node. And they completely, please, I see that you've come back in. Correct me if some of those answers were incorrect. Uh, but
No. Well, I would
uh,
say, hopefully I'm back.
yes, you're sounding much clearer, and I do not see a low or poor connection from your system. So why don't you go ahead and see if you can share your screen? And if we start having issues when you share your screen, maybe what can happen. Well, you're also switching between different
Yeah,
presentations chat. So why don't you go ahead and share your screen? We'll go from there.
great. And if it becomes an issue, guys, what I will do is I will actually re-record this whole session locally, and we will upload a clean recording of the whole thing, so that you get to see it all from end to end and without the disruption. So yes, let me just get back up the chat window so I can see what's going on. All right. So we're here. We talked a lot about how the assistant can help you in the flows. What I wanted to switch to now for the next few minutes is looking at um, how you can create Node-RED flows that actually leverage AI itself. We'd already talked a bit about the OpenAI nodes. The next one I wanted to move on to is image pattern recognition. So TensorFlow.js, it's been around a long time, and it's a really great tool for building flows that can have some level of pattern recognition, image recognition, audio recognition, whatever the model might be. Now, for the sake of brevity and in case my network becomes troublesome, I'm not going to rebuild this live. I'm going to demo what we have and then talk through how it works, as a kind of a reveal of the art of the possible, without, this was probably an hour's work, if that, to get what I'm going to demo here working. So what I have locally is over on my shelf to my left, I have a webcam, which if I lean in, you can see, hopefully, oh, it is just out of reach, but so I have a webcam. The idea with this demo is, if you think in a sort of manufacturing process type of scenario, you want to watch objects passing on a line, you want to either count what you see, you want to spot defects, spot things that shouldn't be there, whatever it might be. So having a TensorFlow.js model trained up on what to look for makes that super easy. Now, I'm sat in my office. I'm not on a manufacturing line. I don't have lots of factory lines going past, but I do have a lot of Lego. So I have the wizard, which, there we are. You can see it has detected a wizard. I have a goblin, and again, you can see it's been detected. And I have the hero. So it's a very simple demo of, depending who is seen, it just increments a count of who's being seen. I'm doing them in the same order, and just to prove this isn't faked, I'm going to put him in again. So yeah, just it's a silly example, spotting minifigures, but if you put this into an industrial setting, yeah, this could be monitoring, as I say, objects going past on a machine line, whatever it might be. So what I want to talk a bit about, rather than build this from scratch, is just how this is working. So I have a live feed from that webcam that you can see. It's just an MJPEG stream that is accessible. And in Node-RED, we've got this node, the MJPEG consumer, which is a standard third-party node. I can just point it at that stream, and I'm telling it every 2 seconds, just emit a frame. And then, and this is where the magic happens, I'm passing it to the Teachable Machine node. So Teachable Machine is a Google service that makes it really easy to build TensorFlow models. And what I've done is I captured around 30 or so images of each of the minifigures. And you can see I've sort of a lot of variety in position and angle and the like. And then by dumping them in Teachable Machine, I just tell it, these are the samples of the different classes I've got for the 3 different minifigures, and include some cases for the empty scenario. I trained the model and exported it. And what that exported model gives me is a URL that the Teachable Machine node, I can just point at that URL. What's great with this is I can also download that model locally and tell it to use local files. So this doesn't have to have any online access. And then, so what we've got here is then every 2 seconds, we're capturing a frame from that stream. We pass it to Teachable Machine, and then we see what it recognizes. Now it's going to recognize, because of how we've trained the model, one of our classes being either hero, goblin, wizard, empty. Nice and simple. And then we've just got some flow going on. We filter out duplicates. You know, if I hold one there for too long, don't tell me I've seen that one multiple times. I increment our counts of how many we've seen of each one. And then we have a dashboard to chart node that makes it super simple just to throw up a chart with that in. Yeah, as I said, this was an hour's work maybe. And it probably took me longer just to capture all these test images than it took me to build the rest of it. But again, it's the flexibility of Node-RED. We've got nodes like the OpenAI node, so you can integrate ChatGPT directly in your flows. Teachable Machine node, so you can have these sorts of models directly in your flows. Makes it super simple. And I say all of this is running on a Raspberry Pi locally on my desk, although I'm managing that as a remote device attached to the FlowFuse cloud, so I can access this from anywhere. And as you can see here, yes, it's a device running on my desk, but because I'm accessing it as a FlowFuse device, I've got the FlowFuse Assistant integrated here as well. So, for example, here I've got my function node that formats the chart data just as I need it. I could just have easily, I didn't when I did, I wrote that code when I did it, but it could just as easily get the FlowFuse Assistant to generate the same code. And it's always interesting to see it's taken a different approach to the same problem, but it gets exactly the same result. Yeah, it does it with a bit of JavaScript magic to map from the stored counts to the structure that I've asked it for. Again, makes it super easy to build what you want to build. Not wanting to tempt too much fate if my bandwidth still goes off the cliff. I hope I'm still
You're still coming in
alive.
clear.
Nice.
That all came in clear now that you've reconnected. We had just a small little blip here and there, but coming in clear.
Okay, so anyway, I've barely scratched the surface, but as you can see, the power of Node-RED, lots of third-party nodes to talk to different AI services. Things like TensorFlow, things like OpenAI nodes are great examples. In the interest of time, there were some other examples that I was going to run through. Well, I was going to try and run through, but I decided best just to point and acknowledge work done by others doing some really interesting stuff. Yoki-san, who I think I saw in the attendee list, so as ever, shout out to you. He's done a really interesting piece about being able to run an LLM on a Pi offline. So I think using Tiny Llama to actually do the LLM work on the Pi. I made the mistake of trying to follow these instructions on my Raspberry Pi 3. My Raspberry Pi 3 isn't powerful enough to do what's needed. So, oh, sorry. So definitely something for a Pi 4 or even a Pi 5. But yeah, great example of how you can transfer some of this to an offline only experience, which is important in manufacturing environments. And another example, which again, Yoki-san, I think you're responsible for, but this was something you did a while ago, I think, which was a Node-RED plugin that can document flows. So again, using ChatGPT to analyze the flow JSON and come up with a description. Funnily enough, we actually have a version of this internally that we use sometimes when we're supporting our customers. And it is something we're going to look at what makes sense in the FlowFuse Assistant to integrate this sort of documentation capability, because it's a great use case, having the machine describe the purpose of a flow rather than trying to do it yourself. But as I say, there's an existing third-party plugin from Yoki-san who does that to great effect. Okay, so that's kind of the end of my portion of this. That hopefully I've, despite the bandwidth issues, I do apologize for that. Hopefully to get across the value of the FlowFuse Assistant integrated right in the Node-RED editor. It's not extra nodes, it's not custom nodes. It really is just there as part of the native Node-RED user experience, and can really make it quick and easy to write your function nodes, to generate your JSON data. But we are looking at other opportunities to enhance it. Where else can the assistant help in the Node-RED user experience? And we're going to iterate on that quite quickly and keep adding new features. So stay tuned on that front. And then also examples of how you can leverage AI within the flows themselves. So yeah, so please do ask your questions. I can see some are in there. Carl suggests to use AI to try to create a diagram of a flow. That would be great. Absolutely. Yeah, I think certainly generating the prose, the text description is one thing. I know there was we have support for mermaid diagrams for doing actual sequence diagrams in the info sidebar. And yeah, so that is something is definitely interesting.
Nick,
so thanks for that question.
Yeah. Do you think you have an example? Like, so some people might be using the FlowFuse cloud or something like that. They might need access to it, or understanding how that they might need to upgrade something on the side. Can you through that maybe, so that we could potentially help?
Sure.
So if you're FlowFuse right now, you can automatically get that upgraded, or using that and leveraging that now.
Absolutely. So let me just keep Kingfisher. So essentially, the FlowFuse Assistant is available now to any newly created instance on the FlowFuse Cloud. So when you've signed up to FlowFuse, dive in, get the Node-RED instance, you'll find the FlowFuse Assistant already there. If you already have an instance on FlowFuse Cloud, then if you come to the instance page, you may notice, okay, I've picked a bad example because I'm up to date. Let me go find Nick's Playground, determined black, but no. Trouble is, I keep my device, I keep my instance up to date, Gray. That's the problem.
Yeah, that was good.
So,
but what we can just highlight, but right there where Nick is highlighting on the right-hand side, there's going to be a little button that says update, which will take you to the, I believe it's the settings directory, and
settings page, and then there'll be a big update button.
Yes,
that will update you to the latest of the FlowFuse launcher and Node-RED, and we'll get you the assistant included.
And that for the please chat the link to the local LLM that was
Yeah.
shown.
Yeah, I will grab that stuff. So in the chat we have that's the local LM, and then developing flows one is there. So I've stuck them both into chat, but yeah, if you just search for local LM on Raspberry Pi, you'll find this. And yeah, again, shout out to Yoki-san. He's done some great stuff in this area, and yeah, as I definitely learned my lesson of not trying to compile this stuff on a Raspberry Pi 3 because
um Yeah,
yeah,
and the next question was basically you know how you precede kind of like an assistant for LLMs, and I guess the question is are we preceding the prompt with
yeah,
information about we are Node-RED? I don't know if we necessarily need to fully share all that details, but I mean I know we've had chats internally to that, but I'll let you answer that, Nick.
sure. So absolutely, we take the prompt you provide, and yes, we do have a system prompt that gives the context that this is a Node-RED function node um, that it is being asked about, which allows the system to then know what APIs it has available to it, how to send messages, the fact that I think we add a lot of additional stuff around. We tell it that there's a local variable called message that is the received message, and we've developed quite a lot of system prompts around that to try and fine tune and make it as useful as possible. And it's something we continue to enhance. We're suddenly in the mode of still learning ourselves what works and how we can improve that prompt. So that's the current model. So we aren't using a custom LLM today. We do lean on, and I forget exactly which model. I know we've tried a few different, and I've gone blank on which one we're currently connected to. But yeah, so there's that side. I see Aaron has asked. Oh, there we are. Steve has GPT 4.0 is the model we currently connect to. So thanks for that, Steve. And I should shout out, Steve is in the chat there, has done great job on bringing the FlowFuse Assistant to life. Everything I've demoed is his hard work. So big shout out to Steve. So I see Aaron has asked, are there ambitions to extend FlowFuse Assistant to generate entire flows rather than just function nodes? That is, believe me, that was probably top of the list when we started to kick around ideas. Unfortunately, the existing LLMs are not reliable enough. So the quality of the flows it was producing were just not quite high enough for us to launch it as a feature. So yeah, it is something we aspire to, but we need to work out how we can get there sensibly. One of the realities is obviously the training data available to OpenAI around generic JavaScript and Node.js is vastly larger than training data available on what is a valid Node-RED flow. So that's always the difficulty with these problems, is having enough training data to be able to train the AI to do the right thing. So yeah, I'd love to get to the point where we have enough confidence that we feel like it's something we can actually make generally available. It might be something we can do as more of a preview feature without necessarily the guarantees behind it in terms of accuracy. But yeah, it's not straightforward. I realized the time, so I want to crack on. Lewis, you've asked any idea when the AI helper will be available in self-hosted version. Please do reach out to us separately. We can talk. Essentially, there are the way we have built this so far, we need to look at how what makes sense to roll that out to self-hosted users. Um, that's the reality of it. It is, we need to work out what makes sense and what model is going to work best for self-hosted users. But we'd love to have a self-hosted customer who is actively interested in it, who we can partner with and work with to work out some of the answers to those questions. It does come back to API keys, your key, our key, whatever it might be, and just figuring out what makes sense in that model. Another question from Lewis about AI helpers generating HTML templates. Not that we have today, but again, we could suddenly, it would be a low-hanging piece of fruit to add to the template node if you're an HTML to generate a template. So not there today, but suddenly an idea worth capturing. Aaron asks, is FlowFuse Assistant using our own open API keys, or is this service provided for FlowFuse within the FlowFuse fees project? Sure. So when in FlowFuse Cloud, it's just part of what you get for your FlowFuse Cloud team. So there's no configuration you have to do in FlowFuse Cloud to make use of this. It's using our API keys on the platform, and obviously, all the costs are ours, and it's just factored into the cost of the use of our platform. So you don't have to set up anything separate. That is one of the things we need to think about for self-hosted customers as to what makes sense from a financial model and just a ease of use model. Okay, well, that was all the questions. I will say, I think I'd like to say, of course, if you want to get started with this stuff, FlowFuse Cloud, you can sign up flowfuse.com for a 2-week free trial. Try the assistant for yourself right now. We do have the self-hosted. You can also book some time with us to get a demo or talk to us if you have more specific requirements. Just always happy to chat about this stuff. Apologies again for the disruption in service along the way. We'll review the recording and see if we want to put up I'm happy to do a cleaner re-record if there were bits that were missed, but unfortunately then we will lack some of the questions you guys ask, which is always a great part of these webinars.
What we might be able to do is just cut those parts out in which we were having issues and kind of trim it down. I think for the most part, I think we were able to handle it. We just didn't get your expressions as we were recording, which is unfortunate, but it's one of those. It's the nature of the situation. Like, I agree with you, Nick. The questions make the webinars valuable to share. It looks like we had one more in, but I don't know if you want to answer that, and then we'll kind of close things out.
I mean, it's a good question from Aaron. Would be great to have this on the community version of Node-RED, maybe a FlowFuse Assistant subscription feed, have it on local Node-RED instances. So there's lots of opportunity for us to consider what makes sense moving forward. So I don't know whether that's something that we will pursue right now, but it's hopefully as we evolve the FlowFuse Assistant, we can really bring some value to the Node-RED experience. Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for joining.
We'll have this content. One of the things that I'm going to be asking for is the flows that you did specifically for the TensorFlow, because that was pretty neat. My brain was thinking about how that could be used in the manufacturing space, but we'll have that up on the FlowFuse webinar webpage where you'll be able to get and capture a lot of this content, and looking forward to sharing with you. If you want to go ahead and just close us out, Nick.
Of course. As I say, thank you everyone for joining. It's always great fun doing these when things work, and hopefully mostly work today. If you do have any follow-up questions, you know how to reach us. Please do reach out. We love talking about this stuff. And no doubt we'll see you next time for our next exciting topic.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, guys. Cheers then.